Heyo, welcome back to Three Things, because math is hard.
I write down my 3 things, my memory sucks.
I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books and the author of multiple ongoing series, including Quincy Archer Demon Hunter, Bubba the Monster Hunter, The Black Knight Chronicles, and I've written a few other things here and there. And joining me today is Falstaff Books editor, coordinator,
Yes.
and author of the Caitlin Kelly Monster Hunters series, Teresa Glover, with her fabulous earrings.
Yes.
Is that a skull on a stack of books? That's
Yes,
totally a
it
skull on a stack of books.
It
That's
is a
badass.
tarot card called the Reader.
Ha! That's great. Yeah, if you ever had a tarot card, it would be the Reaper.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that today. I
So,
played the 5th.
in your role as editor, you have certainly come up with a few things that people are frequently doing wrong when it comes to either editing their own work, taking editorial, or preparing a book for editing.
Yes.
So,
And none of these are terrible, awful, horrible things. Everybody makes these mistakes. That's why there's a list of 3 things that we've talked about before, that we talk about at conventions, but we're putting it out here for all of those of you out there who are watching that can't come see us be a bunch of morons in front of a small room of people.
so you can see us be morons in a room in front of a camera and one small person.
Accessibility. All right. So one of the first of 3 things that you're doing wrong is you're saving money on professional editing, because you have your magnum opus as it is, and I can edit, I can spell check, I have Grammarly, etc., etc. My aunt, mother, step cousin, 1st grade teacher can edit for me. No, they can't.
Why is that?
2 things.
Two things?
Well, I had 2 fingers out. 2 things. 2 things. First, you are too close to your own work. Your brain will fill in gaps because you've been telling your story to yourself for so long that you no longer see where it's missing on the page. You just can't see it. I know you're a genius. I know you let it sit, but you still can't see it. Somebody removed from the story needs to look at it critically, and that leads into the second of the 2 things. The person who's evaluating and editing your work needs to be someone who doesn't have an emotional investment in you. You need someone who's not afraid to hurt your feelings sometimes, who is not afraid to be stern with you, and who is not going to default to, oh, it was really good, because that's not helpful. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help your work. It's not going to help your career. Pay somebody to do the work, to be unbiased, and to make this project better, and invest in it.
Now, one thing I will add to that is that another reason Mrs. McGillicuddy, your 7th grade English teacher, isn't going to be worth a crap editing your first book in your epic fantasy trilogy is because editing is more than grammar.
Yes, and there's different kinds of editing.
So make sure that when you are working with an editor that you're getting the right kind of editing for where you are in your career. I'm 30-something books into my writing career. My stories are probably pretty solid when I'm finished with them. I'm not looking for a whole lot of story edit, but I can still absolutely use line edit, continuity edit, copy edit, proofread. God knows I don't know where the commas go. So the more editorial on the mechanics, the better. But if it's your first book, then you need someone who knows how to look at the tropes of the genre, especially if for some stupid ass reason you have decided to write in a genre you've never read.
Yeah, that's bad. Don't do that.
Yeah, by the way, don't do that.
Yeah. But to your point, having an editor who specializes in the genre that you're writing helps because they know what those readers expect.
Yeah.
I couldn't edit a romance from a developmental aspect because I don't read romance and I don't know what the audience would expect. But I do read and write both in horror and horror comedy. So I know how to play with tension levels. I know when to break it, when to adjust it. You need someone who can do that for whatever genre it is that you're working with.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your reader won't be happy.
All right.
Anyway, okay, the second thing, you're trying too hard. And I know that generally sounds like a good thing because aren't we all supposed to be trying hard to do stuff?
No, I'm really lazy.
You're a special case, John, we know this. But what I mean when I say you're trying too hard is you are taking every little piece of advice you've ever been given and trying to cram it all in one story. And you lose your sense of self, you lose the sense of story, and now you just sound like writing. And there's a difference between sounding like a story, having a voice, and sounding like writing. And if you don't know, find somebody who loves you who can explain it because it's going to be a painful conversation.
It really is. And it's a lot of times when we're talking to newer writers, unpublished writers, barely published writers, I tend to tell them, just find somebody to rip off.
Yeah.
It's fine. We are all knocking off somebody because I can rip off Jim Butcher.
Right. I rip off John.
But Jim Butcher rips off somebody, and whoever Jim rips off is ripping off somebody. We all are influenced by other writers, and there's nothing wrong with that. You do not need to be the most specialist snowflake ever.
You're not.
I promise. Just write a good book.
Mm-hmm. Now the flip side of that is when you're trying too hard and you're finding that person that you want to emulate, not imitate.
Yes.
Because there's a difference. That when you find that person that you want to emulate, understand that just because Brandon Sanderson does it or Stephen King or whoever it is that is your idol doesn't mean you can get away with it because you haven't earned their professional credit.
There's a whole video on this channel where I talk about something called reader equity.
Yep.
You have to earn everything you want to do in a book. Brandon could not have published Tress of the Emerald Sea as his first book. This is a quirky, fun book with an unreliable narrator and direct address and all kinds of things that he could not have gotten away with before he was Brandon F. Sanderson. When he was just some schmo taking over Wheel of Time, he did not have the reader equity to write what I think is his best book. And I haven't read everything Brandon's produced because, my God, he writes a lot and they're all massive. But this book is lovely, and it was one of my favorite books this year. And no, he could not have published this book when he first started out.
And to put that into context for somebody who's just starting out writing fantasy, just because Brandon Sanderson writes doorstops doesn't mean you get to write one as a first-time writer. So if your editorial staff that is supporting you in your publishing house, in the people that you've hired to work on your book, tells you that your 300,000 word magnum opus needs to be broken down into 300,000 word books, listen to them.
Yeah.
They know what they're talking about. That's why you pay them.
Right. Or that's why they're paying you.
Yeah.
If they're a publishing house and they're publishing your book. Because we are going to use terms kind of interchangeably, because you may hire an editor if you're self-publishing.
Right.
If you're working with a press, we're hiring that editor. We're still working on the same project. We're still working from the same perspective. Our job, your job, my job, Teresa's job, is to make this the best book it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm. And that plays into the third thing. Not communicating with your editor. We are people too.
What?
Believe it or not, we are not lizard people under the skin suit.
I am.
Shh, I'm not supposed to talk about that.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Cut that out.
We are people. So we are also working on this same project. We want it to be the best product that we can produce as a team, whether it's, you know, you working one-on-one to get that self-published book out, whether it's your publishing house trying to get this book to market, whatever the case it is. It may be your baby, but it's also our baby.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that you're a writer and creative person. If there's some gap in understanding between the comments that are written on your story as feedback and what's actually getting translated into your own head, you're probably filling in those gaps and you might be wrong.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely happened.
Because you can see something and tell yourself a story about, well, that's why they said this and blah, 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 when that's not even the case. It may just be your editor was having a bad brain day and didn't translate into English well.
Yeah. And it may be that, so I published the Black Knight Chronicles through Bellbridge Books.
Mm-hmm.
Deb Dixon, who's the publisher of Bellbridge, is my editor for that series. And Deb writes very detailed editorial letters, and she opens every one of them with, "Please remember that we all love you and we love this book."
Mm-hmm. Well,
and then she proceeds to eviscerate me for, I think the first edit letter I got from her was 14 pages single-spaced.
And it could be even something as simple as if the genre that you're writing in is relatively new to you and you're not as familiar with the tropes of that genre that the editor is, if they start to play with certain things or make suggestions that don't seem clear and it feels like they're trying to change your story, ask why. Like, hey, you know, I see that you've made this comment. I don't understand. Why are we doing it this way? Why are you recommending this?
Yeah.
Because it's always a recommendation. It's your book.
That's important at the end of the day, is my name doesn't go on the spine of the books I edit.
Right.
Yours don't go on the spine of the books you edit.
Exactly.
Our names typically aren't mentioned anywhere unless it's in the acknowledgments if the author wants to put them there.
And I mean, that's their prerogative.
Right, whatever. No, it's not our book.
Right.
Now,
but we know that we are responsible for it and we want to make sure that it's a kick-ass book.
And that's me wearing my editor hat.
Yeah.
Me wearing my publisher hat is going to be different. If you have a disagreement with your editor, at the end of the day, it's always your book.
Right.
If you have a disagreement with the publisher, well, it's still always going to be your book.
Mm-hmm.
I just might not publish it. And that may be a hard conversation to have, and you may need to pick the hills you're willing to die on, because if you come to Falstaff and you sell us, let's say you sell us 3 books, and we've read the first one, and the second and third one are coming when it's done. And we've worked through the first book and it's fine. But in between the first and second book, you get a traumatic brain injury or develop a brain tumor, and all of a sudden you're a rampaging homophobe or a racist.
Yeah.
I'm not publishing a book that espouses those ideas.
And sometimes the things that come back in your editorial are conversations that we've had in the back of the house that don't necessarily make it publicly. Like when certain words come up and they change cultural context, and it happens to show up innocently in your manuscript. That's not a mistake that you've made. That's generally a conversation that your editor has had with your publisher about, hey, this is what's here, this is how it was used. I understand that this is not what the intent is, but current cultural references suggest that this is bad. Do we really want to do this?
Yeah. And there are words that were prevalent in fiction 20 years ago that aren't acceptable today.
And even tropes.
And tropes, absolutely. And those are things that, and I, as a publisher, I've had these conversations with my entire editorial staff and said, here are things to watch for. If these things are present in the manuscript, these are not, we will not publish this book, words and tropes. But these are, we're going to have a conversation about them so that everyone is on the same page. So that, for example, we publish a lot of books set in the American South.
Which has a history. And
some of that history uses words that are unacceptable. And I had a conversation with an author about a piece of dialogue, and I said, okay, I'm not comfortable with the use of this word. Why is this word important to you? And the author's response was, that's a quote from a conversation I overheard at a gas station a mile from my home. And I'm trying to paint an accurate picture of the shitty town I live in. That's okay. Word stands.
Yeah. And I mean,
You knew what you were doing, you knew why you were doing it, and you were using that word to paint a picture of a character as a horrible person. And it was used once, and that character was horrible, and I'm pretty sure we killed them in the book.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a different author about the same word, and they said, you know, I know I can rewrite it and not use that language, so
Because
they did.
it wasn't integral to what the story needed.
Right, and it wasn't anything that author felt strongly about. They were espousing the same views in other ways in that book.
And like some of the current tropes, or some of the tropes that have passed in fiction in times previous that are no longer cool, or like essay in the first chapter.
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay, Falstaff, most of our editorial staff and most of our slush readers are women. And if we're seeing that in the first chapter that you've submitted, we're probably not going to be too keen on it. So we're going to have a conversation at the very least about why this is important.
Yeah.
Because it's not an immediate no, but it's probably a no if you can't rewrite that part. But that's an example of something that merits that conversation and requires you to be open to changing your baby.
Yeah. Also, change your baby. Your
Please.
baby has pooped all over itself a couple of times.
Yes.
Please change the baby.
No diaper.
Your
rash,
baby
please.
smells like butthole.
But yes.
No, you're right. Your editor is there to work with you to make the best book possible.
Yep.
So these are a few things that you can work on when you're approaching an editor, when you're working with an editor, and when you are editing your own work. So we will probably do this again because there's a lot that goes into editorial.
And I had way more than 3 things. These
Well,
were just the first 3.
You might have been called wordy once or twice.
Shh.
Bitch, I edit you.
I know. But they're all good words, and I don't put a whole lot of extra junk in there.
No, you don't.
So
No, you don't. But the contract was for 4 books at 30,000 words apiece.
oh, that's irrelevant. The last one just happened to be like 60. It's fine. It's fine.
It got to 120,000 total. It just got there in 3 books instead of
I
4.
never said I was good at math. I'm a writer.
And that's why we're here talking about 2 things. 3 things. 3 things. Bye.